Hello guys, welcome back to our anime explainer. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Tales of Herding God Part 285 to 287 based on novel. So let's start. What's there to be alarmed with about Celestial Venerable Yu's death? The old bull continued to walk and laugh to himself. These people of the ancient times have never seen a dead person before. My head is going to explode from the Celestial Venerable Yu is dead. Celestial Venerable Yu is dead. He couldn't resist giving off a shout, and couldn't care about calling Qin Mu and founding emperor. He hurriedly rushed out of the magnificent floor, and the racket outside still hadn't stopped yet. Some people were bawling loudly, while others stood there with a stupefied look. Some people went to ask others, and when they confirmed the news, they collapsed onto the floor with a dazed look on their faces. The old bull's heart was flustered, and he felt that all the ancient predecessors that had come to attend the meeting had suddenly lost their backbone. He looked at everyone who was clamoring outside. When Celestial Venerable Yu was alive, this place was a golden age that was in the midst of reform, and when the death of Celestial Venerable Yu was released, everyone became like headless flies. A golden age that was about to dawn on them had suddenly dimmed. The death of a great leader was simply too huge of a blow to the people of this era. The old bull's heart was also blank. How did he just die like this? How could he just die like this? It's impossible, right? It's a joke, right? This joke has been taken too far. Footsteps came from his back as Qin Mu, founding emperor, and Celestial Venerable Ling walked over. Their faces were also blank. From the building, they had also heard the cries and racket outside. The news of Celestial Venerable Yu's death had also struck them with an unimaginable impact. Qin Mu and founding emperor had time-traveled to this era, and they hadn't had much interaction with Celestial Venerable Yu. Even though they had only talked once, they had quite a good impression of him. They were also very respectful to Celestial Venerable Yu and felt that he was the leader of the ancient times that would be able to control heaven and earth, bringing the life forms after the beginning to create a new era. They had extremely high evaluations of Celestial Venerable Yu, yet this young leader that was waiting for the time to show his life's work had just suddenly died like this. Qin Mu and founding emperor couldn't accept this. Celestial Venerable Ling was even more unable to accept this. Qin Mu and founding emperor didn't interact much with Celestial Venerable Yu, but she had grown up listening to the legends of Celestial Venerable Yu. When she met him afterward, Celestial Venerable Yu was like a brother that took care of her and gave her encouragement. After she opened up the 6 directions divine treasure, and changed to research the non-existence of time, wanting to prove it with divine art, Celestial Venerable Yu didn't feel that her research would succeed and felt that she had taken the wrong path. However, he still treated her extremely well. The death of Celestial Venerable Yu was a very huge blow to her. Her face turned pale, and she stumbled forward. Qin Mu said with a low voice, "Follow after her and see what happened." The 3 of them hurriedly followed after Celestial Venerable Ling through the sea of people in front. There were people everywhere in the side palace, and they were all in sorrow. Some half-gods were also looking around in the sky. Why would Celestial Venerable Yu suddenly die? Founding emperor said with a low voice, "Divine arts practitioners can't kill an existence like him. He could only be killed if a half-god, or an ancient god made their move, am I right?" Qin Mu thought of something else, and he pondered. Why was Celestial Venerable Yu killed before he announced the method to become a god? Unless getting rid of him is getting rid of the method to become a god. The old bull whispered, could Celestial Venerable Yu be faking his death? If he faked his death, he would be able to stir the conflict between half-gods, humans, and the celestial heavens. Qin Mu and founding emperor shook their heads. The old bull was puzzled. Qin Mu explained, there's no meaning to fake his death in front of the celestial heavens. With Earth Count and Heaven Duke, he can't fake his death at all. His soul won't be able to escape from Yudu's control, and he won't be able to hide from Heaven Duke. He is really dead. Founding Emperor said, furthermore, if he just wants to stir conflict, he doesn't need to fake his death. There's more reason for him to spread out the method to become a god, and that's because after it's spread, there will definitely be conflicts between the new gods and the ancient gods. These conflicts will definitely accumulate as time goes on. This concerns the problem of splitting benefits. New gods would want more benefits, and the ancient gods would be reluctant to give up their benefits. Conflicts will naturally arise. He is such an intelligent man, so he has no need to use the method of faking death. Furthermore, by faking his death, he didn't continue speaking, and it was obvious he had some qualms. However, Qin Mu didn't care and just continued his words. Furthermore, by faking his death, he is no doubt handing the position of the leader out. He won't do this kind of thing that would benefit other people by giving his own hard work to them instead. Founding Emperor gave him a look and was full of worries. He said with a low voice, "We are outsiders, after all, we shouldn't be too involved in this era. We have only come to this era for several days, but I can already feel the darkness pouring forth and dangers lurking in every corner." Qin Mu shook his head and said, "By existing in the past, we are already the past. No matter what we do, when we return to the present, we will realize what we did in the past is the history that has already happened." Veins popped out on Founding Emperor's forehead, and his voice was slightly hoarse. "You want to create trouble again? Must you force me to lay my hands on you?" The old bull didn't know what they were talking about and was very puzzled. However, Qin Mu and Founding Emperor understood each other very well. What they said about benefiting others and the darkness pouring forth were both referring to someone. What they meant was after Celestial Venerable Yu dies, who would benefit the greatest? After the leader dies, the one that would take over Celestial Venerable Yu's position as leader would be the one who benefits the most. Once the reformer was dead, and there was no path to become god, the ancient gods would benefit the most. Celestial Venerable Yu kept running east, and since he had to attend to the people coming for the meeting, he had to coordinate the half-gods and the humans, and even bribe the powers in the celestial heavens, so he rarely had time to rest. He stayed in the slow winding pavilion in the Jade Pool small construction, and at this moment, the slow winding pavilion was already filled with people. Celestial Venerable Hua and Son of Heaven Yin were currently guarding the door, and Celestial Venerable Hua had an expression of sorrow and anger. He stared at everyone and prohibited them from coming forward. Celestial Venerable Ling squeezed forward and asked with a hoarse voice, "Is it true?" Celestial Venerable Hua choked and nodded. "They are all inside. Celestial Venerable Yu is trying to summon the soul to see if he could be saved. Celestial Venerable Hao has already sent a memorial to His Majesty, and invited Earth Count to return his soul." Qin Mu looked at Son of Heaven Yin, and Son of Heaven Yin stood there with a blank gaze. He seemed to be at a loss and was spacing out. His pupils suddenly contracted rapidly as he stared at his hands. 2 drops of tears dripped onto his palms. Celestial Venerable Ling rushed into the slow winding pavilion. Qin Mu, Founding Emperor, and the old bull were also planning to enter the slow winding pavilion when they were stopped by Celestial Venerable Hua. Son of Heaven Yin came back to his senses, and he also hurriedly raised his hands to block. He said apologetically, "Brother Qin, Brother Mu, Celestial Venerable Yu has died inside, you guys can't enter." Celestial Venerable Hua, "Let them in." Celestial Venerable Ling's voice rang out. The attainments in their paths, skills, and divine arts are very high, they might just be able to find clues. Celestial Venerable Hua hesitated, and he put down his arm. He looked at Qin Mu with red eyes and said, "If you can find any clues, I won't hate you anymore." Qin Mu nodded his head and said, "I'll do my best." They walked into the slowing winding pavilion. The pavilion was built on a lake on the island. It overlooked the lake and below was the great waves on the lake surface. This place looked very elegant. That was because this was where Celestial Empress resided, so the slow winding pavilion was also much larger than ordinary constructions. It was also very wide inside. Qin Mu and the three of them walked into this building, and they saw the blood on the ground. This window was busted open, and there were traces of divine arts left on the walls. Celestial Venerable Yu's corpse laid under the window, and he was lying against the window. His head hung down, and his limbs were limp. Celestial Venerable Hao, Celestial Venerable Yun, Celestial Venerable Yu, and Celestial Venerable Yu were all here. Celestial Venerable Hao was holding onto a divine hound, which was sniffing around. Celestial Venerable Yu raised his hands, and his vital qi poured out. He lifted Celestial Venerable Yu's corpse into the air, and 3 feet off the ground. The devil mask on the back of this youth's head starting crying, but Celestial Venerable Yu still remained emotionless as usual. Qin Mu looked at the floating Celestial Venerable Yu, and his bones had basically been completely broken. There was no bone that was unscathed, and someone had smashed his bones with heavy blows. When he floated in the air, there was a peculiar sense of helplessness. From the external injuries, it wasn't just one person that attacked him. Qin Mu walked around Celestial Venerable Yu and examined his injuries. He didn't go too close, but he could clearly see the injuries on his body. However, the most lethal injuries weren't from the broken bones, it was from the back of his heart. Someone suddenly attacked him from the back and severely injured him. Qin Mu slowly circled around, and pictures were already forming in his mind. That person had suddenly attacked from the back, and because he was afraid of leaving traces behind, he didn't use the best divine arts he had. Instead, he had purely used the strength of the corporeal body. With the first strike, he used his terrifying strength to shatter Celestial Venerable Yu's heart. He then avoided Celestial Venerable Yu's attack, and circled quickly around Celestial Venerable Yu. With a series of attacks to the corporeal body, it was like a huge hammer smashing onto Celestial Venerable Yu's corporeal body, and smashed his bones into pieces. The divine art marking on the wall of the slow winding pavilion belongs to Celestial Venerable Yu. Qin Mu looked towards the wall. Celestial Venerable Yu must have trusted the person extremely, therefore, he had a chance to sneak an attack on him. Furthermore, their cultivations shouldn't have much difference. Celestial Venerable Yu's cultivation was stronger, but the opponent's corporeal body was much stronger than him. He attacked back, but he had already lost the upper hand and got his heart shattered. Furthermore, his opponent had also closed in on him. To be closed in by a strong practitioner of the battle technique school, how terrifying was that? Qin Mu cultivated battle techniques himself, so he knew this point very well. However, the thing that truly took Celestial Venerable Yu's life wasn't the injuries on the corporeal body. Qin Mu's heart stirred slightly. A drop of fresh blood floated over, and layers swirled in pupils. He just opened up 8 heavens, and a few miniature divine art runes inside the blood were quickly wiped out. These were the traces left behind by the opponent's divine arts. Celestial Venerable Yu doesn't have any traces of spell divine art on his corporeal body, but there are divine art runes in his blood. This means that the opponent still used his divine art, but the divine art wasn't targeted at the corporeal body. So what was the divine art targeted at? Suddenly, cryptic Yudu language sounded out, and Qin Mu's heart stirred. He looked towards Celestial Venerable Yu. That youth was currently executing Yudu divine art, and chanting the ancient Yudu language, as he tried to summon the soul of Celestial Venerable Yu, calling his soul back from Yudu. His Yudu language wasn't bad, but it was still slightly lacking in Qin Mu's ears. After all, Celestial Venerable Yu still hadn't entered Yudu yet, and become the benevolent saintly king equal to heaven. Celestial Venerable Yu's eyes were blood red, and the Yudu language became messier and messier. Even though his expression was calm, his heart was churning from the huge waves. His heart was messed up, and furthermore, his attainments were still too shallow. Even if his heart wasn't messed up, he couldn't summon Celestial Venerable Yu's soul back from Yudu. I still can't. Celestial Venerable Yu suddenly coughed up blood and knelt on the ground. He started to spasm, and he gave off whines from his throat. He gritted his teeth. I still can't. He curled up, and his body trembled. He choked. I still can't. I can't save Mother. I also can't save Big Brother. I still can't do anything. He was very indifferent to everyone, and even Celestial Venerable Yu. He never showed him any affection, and yet it was always Celestial Venerable Yu that was taking care of him. He had long treated Celestial Venerable Yu as his only kin left in this world. Right at this moment, a warm voice rang out in his mind. I'll say, and you will chant. Celestial Venerable Yu was startled, and he heard that voice in his head ringing out again. That was incomparably ancient and pure Yudu devil language. It was so profound and so marvelous that he felt as if Earth Count had personally descended. Celestial Venerable Yu stood up again and chanted along with that voice. Yudu devil chi came rolling in from the surroundings, and the ground of the slow winding pavilion turned into darkness, revealing a deep space. That was Yudu. His voice traveled throughout the entire Yudu and searched for the soul of Celestial Venerable Yu. To everyone in the slow winding pavilion, Celestial Venerable Yu didn't look like a youth any longer. Instead, he was like a god who controlled the rule of Yudu and was summoning back the dead. Founding Emperor's heart stirred, and he looked at Qin Mu who was beside him. He felt Qin Mu's consciousness sending out waves, and it was a kind of marvelous connection. He could feel that Qin Mu's consciousness was connecting with Celestial Venerable Yu. Celestial Venerable Yu's paths, skills, and divine arts were still very rough earlier, and he couldn't communicate with Yudu, yet now he was actually able to send his voice throughout Yudu. It was obviously not because of Celestial Venerable Yu. It was Qin Mu imparting to him a profound Yudu divine art in secret. He even knows Yudu divine arts, what more does he know? As Founding Emperor thought until here, a gate gradually rose from the darkness. A gate of heaven influence stood upright in the pavilion and gave off sinister devil chi. After a moment, Qin Mu sighed and cut off the connection with Celestial Venerable Yu. Celestial Venerable Yu's soul isn't in Yudu. His soul has dispersed. Now I know what the divine art from that person that killed him was for. His heart dimmed. To destroy his soul. Celestial Venerable Yu suddenly cried out, like a wild beast suppressing his roar. He spasmed again, and started foaming from the mouth. Qin Mu went forward, and his fingers tapped quickly to stabilize his spirit. He helped him up and let him sat by the door. Thank you, Celestial Venerable Yu said softly as he grabbed Qin Mu's hands and looked at the lake out the door. Qin Mu was stunned. Celestial Venerable Yu raised his head and looked at his face with a dazed expression. Thank you. In the slow winding pavilion, Celestial Venerable Hao's voice rang out. Now that Celestial Venerable Yu is dead, what about the Jade Pool meeting? Founding Emperor came to Qin Mu's back and whispered, whoever imparts the method to become a god in this meeting, that is the murderer. Qin Mu slowly straightened his back, and Celestial Venerable Hao's voice rang out. A few days ago, Celestial Venerable Yu passed down the method to become a god to me. Even though he has met an unfortunate end, his legacy will still live on and be brought to a greater height. The corners of Qin Mu's eyes twitched and twitched again. He turned his head with difficulty. A huge hand pressed down on his shoulder. It was firm and strong. Founding Emperor suppressed his voice and said, "It's not related to us. Is there no more righteousness left in this world?" Qin Mu seemed to have a smile that was yet not a smile, a cry that was yet not a cry. Founding Emperor said solemnly, "The things in the past have no righteousness, only the future has. We are currently located in history, and this is something that has already happened. No matter what you do, it's not upholding righteousness. Only in the future is your time to uphold righteousness. You should understand what I'm saying." Qin Mu nodded his head and said with a stupefied tone, "I understand." Founding Emperor slowly let go and said, "Even in history, every choice you make can lead to your death. If even such an outstanding person like Celestial Venerable Yu is dead, you will only die if you participate." Qin Mu nodded his head. "I understand." Founding Emperor let out a sigh of relief and said, "Even though I don't know what grudge you have with me, I feel you aren't a bad person, you shouldn't die here." Qin Mu's expressionless face slowly melted, and he revealed a smile. "Thank you. Actually, I'm already satisfied to be able to meet you, my trip isn't wasted." Founding Emperor said, "To be able to meet the 7 Celestial Venerables and someone like you, I also feel my trip isn't wasted. According to what you said, there should still be 1 to 2 months' time, right? In these 2 months, let us quietly witness this history. Even though Celestial Venerable Yu is dead, his method of becoming a god will still be passed down. Isn't that the reason why we have come here?" Qin Mu nodded his head and said in a daze, "All right." Founding Emperor still felt slightly uneasy, and he said to the old bull, "You are his senior brother, you are more rational than he is, you should know what to do. This is the ancient god's celestial heavens, even you can't be reckless. If you are reckless, there will be great danger." The old bull hesitated and nodded his head. "Don't worry, I'll look after him." Celestial Venerable Hao's voice rang out, and spread throughout the Jade Pool small construction. "Celestial Venerable Yu is dead, the murderer has yet to be discovered, but is hiding among us. Everyone, I have already sent up a memorial to His Majesty Celestial Emperor, requesting His Majesty to track down the murderer, and deal with him, returning justice to Celestial Venerable Yu, returning justice to all of the divine arts practitioners in the world." The Jade Pool small construction was silent, and suddenly, soft crying voices sounded out, and the cries coming from the silence were incomparably stifling. Celestial Venerable Hao was furious, and he said loudly, "Everyone, I will definitely not let off that murderer, and I will tear him into pieces. Celestial Venerable Yu's blood shall not flow for nothing. Don't worry, believe in the celestial heavens, believe in His Majesty." His voice slowly grew low, but it still traveled clearly into everyone's ears. Even though Celestial Venerable Yu is dead, his path won't die. Celestial Venerable Yu and I are best friends, and he has already passed down the method to become a god to me. He must have known misfortune would strike, and thus, he taught me the method to become a god beforehand, so he wouldn't leave behind any regrets. For now, let us first mourn for Celestial Venerable Yu and let him rest in peace. His voice became lower and lower. He was like an older brother and also like a father. It's a pity that the heavens are jealous of outstanding talent. The funeral will last for 10 days, and I will personally keep watch beside Brother Yu. After 10 days, I will pass down the method to become a god." His voice gradually became lower, and his cries came out. "Brother Yu." Qin Mu looked at Celestial Venerable Hao, who was lying on Celestial Venerable Yu's body and wailing. Qin Mu pulled back his gaze and looked at Son of Heaven Yin, who was still looking at his own hands. Qin Mu closed his eyes, and after a moment, he opened his eyes with a bright gaze. When Founding Emperor saw him like this, he revealed a worried look. In Celestial Heaven's meeting, numerous ancient gods were discussing matters. The body of the Celestial Emperor was huge, and the rays behind his head were giving off 10,000 rays of sunlight. To be able to discuss matters here, they were ancient gods with high and respected positions. Even ancient gods, like the Great Sun Sovereign, and the 5 Elements Star Sovereigns didn't have the right to join. Suddenly, an ancient god came over in a hurry to report. Your Majesty, Celestial Venerable Yu of the human race has been murdered. He died in the Jade Pool small construction. Celestial Venerable Hao has sent a memorial up to report this matter to His Majesty. Celestial Venerable Yu is dead. Celestial Emperor was astonished and said, "Present it." That ancient god walked forward and presented Celestial Venerable Hao's memorial. Celestial Emperor took a look and closed the memorial. Celestial Venerable Yu has been killed by a villain. It's truly a pity. I was still full of hope for him. His talent was outstanding, and he had a sense of propriety. I was still waiting to see the golden age that he would be creating for me, and never would I expect him to be assassinated. Earth Count. In the darkness, Earth Count bowed slightly. Your Majesty. Celestial Emperor said, Celestial Venerable, you can't die just like this. His soul should have gone to Yudu, right? Bring his soul over and ask for the whole story. Earth Count's body sank, and after a moment, he reappeared and shook his head. Celestial Venerable Yu is not in Yudu. Celestial Emperor frowned slightly and asked Goddess of Heavenly Yin, Goddess of Heavenly Yin. Celestial Venerable Yu has most likely become a broken soul. Is his broken soul over at your place? Goddess of Heavenly Yin was currently sitting in Heaven Duke's shadow, and after a moment, she replied, Your Majesty, Celestial Venerable Yu's broken soul isn't in my Heavenly Yin world. Celestial Emperor sighed. His soul has most likely dispersed. Heaven Duke, have you seen the site where Celestial Venerable Yu was harmed? Heaven Duke shook his head. Xuandu is always supervising all worlds, but the Jade Pool is Celestial Empress's residence. I can't shine there. Celestial Emperor was silent for a moment. Pass down my order. Summon Heavenly Sight and Earthy Hearing Generals. They are to investigate this matter strictly, and find out the true murderer, who murdered Celestial Venerable Yu. As you command. Celestial Venerable's funeral hall was erected, and Celestial Venerable Hao personally kept watch. The divine arts practitioners of all the worlds walked up and bowed farewell to this young man that created the cultivation system of divine arts. Qin Mu, founding emperor, and the old bull also came to bid farewell to Celestial Venerable Yu's corpse. When founding emperor saw Qin Mu not doing anything, only then did he put his heart down. He must have listened to my words. This is for the best. I was truly afraid he would create huge trouble. Qin Mu looked at Celestial Venerable Hao. Celestial Venerable Hao seemed to have slimmed down these few days. 10 days of keeping watch quickly passed by. The two ancient gods from the celestial heavens also brought a bunch of half-gods to search, but to no avail. Celestial Venerable Yu was buried beside the celestial river. The celestial river surged and flowed non-stop. Finally, the day came for Celestial Venerable Hao to pass down his learning. Celestial Venerable Hao was full of vigor, and he first imparted the method for half-gods to cultivate into humans. He was truly an outstanding genius, and when he solved the problem of half-gods being unable to cultivate, he raised waves of cheers. Founding Emperor had originally planned to go to the Side Palace and witness this grand occasion that would influence countless years after today. However, Qin Mu, the old bull, and Celestial Venerable Ling had all remained in the magnificent floor, so he hesitated. He said to the old bull, You must look after him and stop him from creating any trouble. If he still creates trouble, Celestial Venerable Hao will push the blame of murdering Celestial Venerable Yu to him. The old bull nodded his head. I understand. Only then did founding emperor leave. Qin Mu took a glance at Celestial Venerable Ling, who was in a daze, and he took out his Daotai sack. He poured out the items in his sack and took out Buddha Vitality Crimson Chromium, and after quickly hammering, a coffin made from pure Buddha Vitality Crimson Chromium was forged. Celestial Venerable Ling looked at him in a daze. Qin Mu stuffed this coffin into the Daotai sack, and quickly tidied things up. He took another glance at this young girl, and Celestial Venerable Ling was still staring at her with a lifeless gaze. "Senior brother, I'm going out for a while, I'll be back soon," Qin Mu said with a smile. The old bull was alarmed and asked, "What are you going to do? Don't be reckless." Qin Mu shook his head. "Don't worry, I won't be reckless." The old bull said, "I'll follow you." Qin Mu walked out, and the old bull was surprised. Qin Mu didn't walk to the main hall of the side palace, and instead, he left the jade pool. He's not going to get rid of Celestial Venerable how? Qin Mu came to the shore of the Celestial River, and found Celestial Venerable Yu's tomb. The old bull was even more puzzled. Qin Mu had already paid his respects to Celestial Venerable Yu, so why had he still come here? Qin Mu walked towards Celestial Venerable Yu's tomb, and raised his 5 fingers towards the sky. The chunks of stone from the tomb loosened and parted into the surroundings. Ding! The nails in the coffin came off, and the lid of the coffin floated up. The corpse of Celestial Venerable Yu laid in the coffin gradually floated up. Qin Mu surrounded Celestial Venerable Yu's corpse to move quickly, and used all kinds of creation mudras to smack all area of Celestial Venerable Yu's body. Snapping sounds came from Celestial Venerable Yu's body as his broken bones started to reconnect. Broken bones inside his body actually merged back together, and his broken bones grew back. Not only that, the flesh and blood of his shattered heart were also reconstructing itself. Very quickly, his body no longer had any more injuries. This was creation technique. If it was attainments in the path of creation, Qin Mu was enough to top then and now. And finally, Qin Mu's palm grasped onto a mudra, and he gently placed it over Celestial Venerable Yu's heart. His palm force burst forth, and Celestial Venerable Yu's cold and stiff body suddenly jolted. The blood that had stopped flowing suddenly started to flow again. Next, the old bull heard a heartbeat from Celestial Venerable Yu's body. It was followed by the second and third beat. He revealed a look of disbelief. He looked at Qin Mu, and then he looked at Celestial Venerable Yu. His mind was completely blown. Qin Mu opened his Daotai sack, and took out that coffin he had just forged. The coffin lid opened up, and Celestial Venerable Yu gently floated into the coffin. The coffin closed again, and flew back into Daotai sack. Qin Mu turned back towards the jade pool. The old bull hurried after him, and he turned back to see the tomb of Celestial Venerable Yu being restored to its original condition, as the stones reassembled themselves. No abnormality could be seen from the restored tomb. Neo Sanduo hesitated for a moment, and he finally couldn't resist asking, "Junior brother, there's no use even if you revive Celestial Venerable Yu's corpse, he is still dead after all. His soul has already dispersed." Qin Mu didn't reply to him, and just kept walking forward. He returned to the magnificent floor, and smiled at Celestial Venerable Ling, who was still in a daze. "Sister Ling, keep this coffin properly." He took out Celestial Venerable Yu's coffin, and placed it in front of Celestial Venerable Ling. Celestial Venerable Ling's lifeless gaze stirred as she looked at the coffin. "When you meet Celestial Venerable Yu again, pass this coffin to him, and get him to hide it in Yudu. Tell him, in the future, a person named Mu will find him." Qin Mu had a warm expression and said gently, "Mu will tell him, I understand, I'm back. Once he says that, he can take out this coffin. Sister Ling, I'm going to go." He got up and walked out of the floor. Celestial Venerable Ling stood up and asked with a hoarse voice, "Where are you going?" Qin Mu stopped and turned back with a radiant smile. "To finish what I should have finished. Big sister, let us meet again in the future." He walked out of the floor and raised his head to look at the sky. The sun was blazing above his head. Celestial Emperor has sent a decree. Mu Qing, Qin Kai, their paths and skills are profound, and they are talents with abilities to rule the world. They are capable of supporting the ruler in governing the world, and so they are hereby conferred, Mi-Ching, title Celestial Venerable Mu, Qin Kai, Celestial Venerable Qin. In the side palace of the Jade Pool small construction, Celestial Venerable Hao read Celestial Emperor's decree, and said with a smile, "Congratulations, Brother Qin and Brother Mu. From now on, there will be 9 Celestial Venerables. It's a pity." His expression dimmed, and he seemed to recall Celestial Venerable Yu that had passed away. "However, Brother Yu probably can't see this anymore. Brother Mu. Celestial Venerable Mu. Celestial Venerable Qin, where is Celestial Venerable Mu?" Founding Emperor said, "He is in magnificent floor, he didn't come over." Celestial Venerable Hao said with a smile, "Congratulations, Celestial Venerable Qin, from today onwards, both Brother Qin and Brother Mu will be Celestial Venerables. Now, let me talk about the method to become a god that Brother Celestial Venerable Yu had created." Right at this moment, his eyes stared at the door of the hall. His mouth was agape, and he was speechless. Everyone was waiting for his lecture when they saw his expression. They all turned and the hall was silent. At the door of the side palace, Celestial Venerable Yu stood there silently, and he looked at Celestial Venerable Hao across the room. After a moment, Celestial Venerable Yu took a step forward and walked towards Celestial Venerable Hao. He said indifferently, "Celestial Venerable Hao, let me explain the method of becoming a god that I have created personally." Founding Emperor's mind was blown as he looked at this Celestial Venerable Yu that was walking by his side. His heart was flustered. "Impossible, he can't be alive. Nyo Ben." He looked outside the hall, and the old bull was standing there helplessly. He thought to himself, "Founding Emperor, I'm sorry, I also can't stop him. He has the temper of a bull." Part 286. There were divine arts practitioners in the main hall of the side palace, and the main hall was truly huge. It could easily contain 10,000 people. At that moment, everyone in the hall was looking at the man who had come back from the dead. He was the leader of the people in the past, and his sudden death made countless people weep. His accident also made people wonder if it was the act of ancient gods or half-gods. And now the person who had come back from the dead appeared in front of everyone else. Everyone parted to make way, and they looked at him silently as he walked towards Celestial Venerable Hao calmly. Suddenly, everyone in the crowd murmured, and the murmuring got louder and louder. "Celestial Venerable Yu." Someone suddenly shouted loudly, "Celestial Venerable Yu." Even more people began to shout, "Celestial Venerable Yu. Celestial Venerable Yu." Waves of sound emerged, and each shout was louder than the previous one. The shouts that suddenly burst forth caused the air inside the main hall of the Celestial Emperor's side palace to surge, and it caused the sound waves to rise into the sky, dispersing the clouds. More and more divine arts practitioners joined in, and they only shouted Celestial Venerable Yu's name. In their eyes, the man that was walking up the altar was their leader. It was him that had brought all the races to slaughter out a path of survival. Qin Mu was slightly stunned, and he slowed down his footsteps. He looked around at the enthusiastic people, and as a person from another world, he couldn't understand the fervent display of these people. In the hall, these divine arts practitioners were from all kinds of worlds, and they could be considered leaders in their own lower bounds, yet they could still follow another leader so fervently. It was truly hard for him to understand. What he didn't know was in the current celestial heavens, even though the civilization was prosperous, all of the worlds didn't have this kind of harmonious sight. Instead, dangers were running amok, and divine beasts that had the bloodlines of ancient gods were everywhere. Most of the humans and the people of the various races wore grass shoes and grass clothes. They wielded long spears made from wood, and they struggled to survive with difficulty. It was fine if they encountered normal wild beasts, but if they encountered a divine beast with the bloodline of an ancient god, they would have deaths and casualties, becoming the meal in the stomach of the half-gods. Even the weakest half-gods were much stronger than the human race. The danger wasn't only from here. There were also meteorological phenomena, violent storms, volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, and all kinds of natural disaster loomed over the primitive times. It was at this time, when Celestial Venerable You opened up the spirit embryo divine treasure, and allowed the weak race to have the power to protect themselves, to be able to fend off natural disasters, and fend off half-gods. He was the leader of all humans, the leader of the weak race. On the altar of the side palace, Celestial Venerable Hao's gaze seemed to be a little flustered. He quickly came back to his senses, and took a glance at Son of Heaven Yin, who wasn't far away. Son of Heaven Yin's face was pale, and he looked at the Celestial Venerable You, who was walking towards the altar in a daze. He was flustered and at a loss. Qin Mu walked up to the altar and walked up step after step. Celestial Venerable Hao, who was on the altar, was also at a loss. He didn't walk down from the divine altar, but he had already slowly regained his composure. Looking at Qin Mu, who was walking up, he revealed a smile. Even though I know you are fake, I can't expose you. He had a smile on his face, and he seemed to be excited. He thought to himself, you are already dead, your soul has already dispersed, it's impossible for you to revive. Who is this that is posing as you? This technique to change the structure of the corporeal body, to change the appearance and bearing, it's indeed marvelous. I can't expose you. If I expose, I would be exposed, others will know you died in my hands. However, you can expose yourself. The divine altar was very high, and everyone below could look up there. Qin Mu walked up to the altar, and Celestial Venerable Hao opened his arms wide, hugging him tightly. He was so agitated that he was choking on tears, but he was thinking of something else. The true Celestial Venerable You has imparted the method to become a god to me, but he has never imparted it to anyone else. You don't know the method to become a god. I can just wait and let you expose yourself. When that time comes, you will be the butcher that killed Celestial Venerable You, and get stoned by everyone. He let go of Qin Mu and wiped his tears. Qin Mu laughed and said, Celestial Venerable Hao, why are you like this when I've come back from the dead? Please take a seat. Celestial Venerable Hao sat down, and his eyes were red. Brother Yu is still alive. I thought you were dead and even kept watch for 10 days, burying you personally. Yet Brother Yu has suddenly appeared. You have surprised and delighted this foolish brother. Brother Yu, who assassinated you? Two very close people to me. Qin Mu said with a slight smile, one killed my corporeal body, and the other destroyed my soul. Son of Heaven Yin's hands were shaking, and Celestial Venerable Hao's pupils contracted. Qin Mu suddenly moved, and under everyone's gaze, he punched right at the back of Celestial Venerable Hao's heart. He used this move to shatter my heart. Son of Heaven Yin was astonished, however, Celestial Venerable Hao stood there and didn't move. This was because that punch from Qin Mu had no force at all. Qin Mu's body moved as fast as lightning, and his strikes were quick and overbearing. Every punch and every kick was clear as day to let everyone see clearly. He used this move to shatter my ribs. He used this move to break my fingers. He snapped my arm like this. Qin Mu was as fast as lightning, and he quickly reenacted the scene where Celestial Venerable You was assassinated. Beads of cold sweat rolled down Celestial Venerable Hao's forehead, and he said with a smile, Brother You scared me. So how did the other person destroy Brother Yu's soul? Qin Mu's vital qi burst forth, and the sinister wind started to blow while the cloud turned dark. He was about to execute his divine art. Son of Heaven Yin saw the situation, and suddenly collapsed onto the floor with a thump. He had fainted. Qin Mu tapped on Celestial Venerable Hao's forehead with a finger and said, the other person used this move to destroy my soul the moment my corporeal body died. Celestial Venerable Hao revealed a sincere smile, and said cordially, "Luckily Brother Yu hasn't died. Brother Yu is truly blessed by heavens, it's fortunate that you have returned in peace. Look, Chao Jin has even fainted from agitation. Since Brother Yu is here, I shall not take your credit. May Brother Yu tell us about the method that can let all living things become gods. Little brother will go down first." Qin Mu grabbed his wrist and laughed. "Since I've already imparted the method of becoming a god to you, let us impart the method of becoming a god together. You shall talk about one section, and I will talk about another." Celestial Venerable Hao said in delight, "How can I reject when Brother Yu is guiding me? In that case, let Brother Yu start with the introduction, and I'll continue with the second section." Qin Mu swept his sleeves and sat down. He signaled for Celestial Venerable Hao to take a seat too. Celestial Venerable Hao sat down and said with a smile, "Brother Yu, please." Founding Emperor had already retreated to the door of the main hall subconsciously, and he moved close to the old bull. He whispered, "If there's any change in the situation, you must save him." Neo Sanduo hurriedly said, "Why would there be a change in the situation? The divine bridge is connected to the celestial palaces. Junior brother just needs to talk about letting the primordial spirit levitate heavenwards toward the celestial palaces, and he will pass. Celestial Venerable Hao can't expose him." Founding Emperor shook his head and said solemnly, "Celestial Venerable Hao has ill intentions, and the reason why he wanted him to talk about the first section is to let him give the game away. You also know that the primordial spirit can levitate in the celestial palaces and become immortal like gods, to become equal to the ancient gods. However, there are no celestial palaces in the people of this era." The old bull was stunned. Beads of cold sweat broke out on his forehead. Founding Emperor said solemnly, "The people of this era still haven't opened up the celestial palaces, and their divine bridge is merely a floating bridge. Celestial Venerable Yu's feat was to create a celestial palace from nothing. Now that is dead, only Celestial Venerable Hao has mastered this technique of opening the celestial palace. Mu Qing, doesn't he know how to open up the celestial palace? If he knows, he will be another Celestial Venerable Yu. If he doesn't, he will be exposed." The old bull's heart gradually sank, and he muttered, "Why doesn't he just say that it was Celestial Venerable Hao that harmed him and just beat him to death? Why must he do such a thing like imparting the techniques? He has other intentions for going up the altar. He wants to restrain Celestial Venerable Hao and also let Celestial Venerable Hao pass down the method to become a god. This prevents the future civilization from having no method to become god. Thus he can't get rid of Celestial Venerable Hao immediately." Founding Emperor suppressed his voice. However, Celestial Venerable Hao is also a formidable person. He saw through his intention. "This person is sinister and will be my arch-nemesis. This is the ancient gods' celestial heavens in the ancient times. There are half-gods and divine arts practitioners all around. If he can't answer, Celestial Venerable Hao doesn't need to attack. The other half-gods and divine arts practitioners would beat Mu Qing to death. What's more," he revealed a worried look and thought to himself, "the Jade Pool is the garden of Celestial Empress. For Celestial Venerable Hao to dare kill Celestial Venerable Yu in Celestial Empress place, the water here is too deep. Celestial Venerable Hao is a half-god, a child from an ancient god and a human. Who is that ancient god? Mu Qing is too reckless. We are here this time to search for the marvel of the ancient times, and he's actually participating in it, putting himself in danger." On the altar, Qin Mu's vital qi soared out, and it was gorgeous. His vital qi transformed and formed the spirit embryo, 5 elements, 6 directions, 7 stars, celestial being, life and death, and divine bridge, the 7 great divine treasures. By using vital qi to materialize them, he showed the marvel of the 7 great divine treasures to everyone. Exquisite algebra. Monk, Celestial Venerable Yu's attainments in algebra is actually so high. A Daoist holding his compass raised his head and looked. He praised continuously and said to the monk beside him, as expected of Celestial Venerable Yu, he is about to enter the path with algebra. Truly marvelous beyond words. Can you see that his divine treasures are formed from algebra structures? On the side, the monk was currently begging. This senior brother, us senior and junior brothers have been starving for 2 days. Just see our fate, and give 2 spirit pills. This algebra is useless to me, I only cultivate the heart. Qin Mu used his vital qi to construct the divine treasure, and it was exactly the model he had constructed with Xu Xinghua and the rest. That was why it was remarkably true to life. His vital qi transformed into Celestial Venerable Yu's apparition, and he came to the top of the divine bridge. He was about to reach the end of the bridge. Founding Emperor became nervous. The most crucial time was now. If Qin Mu was unable to take out the method to become a god, Celestial Venerable Hao would accuse him of being an impostor, and would even push the blame of Celestial Venerable Yu's death to him. The Celestial Venerable Yu transformed from Qin Mu's vital qi came to the end of the bridge and stopped. Founding Emperor's palms were covered in cold sweat. The people of the future only knows that once they cultivate to the divine bridge realm, their primordial spirit could levitate into the celestial palace. However, they didn't know where the celestial palace had come from. The method to open the celestial palace was long lost. The future people only knew the celestial palace existed, but they didn't know the reason why. They were the descendants of divine arts practitioners that opened up the celestial palace, therefore no matter if it was their divine treasures or celestial palace, they were always there. As long as they cultivated to a certain realm, they would be able to open up their divine treasures and soar into the celestial palace. They didn't need to think about the reason. This was the reason why Celestial Venerable Yu was great. Qin Mu naturally wouldn't know how to open up the celestial palace. If he didn't know, he would make a mistake on the very first move and take the blame for killing Celestial Venerable Yu. This was where the crux lay, and it was also the most dangerous place. How can we open up the celestial palace from nothing? Founding Emperor's brain worked fast, and all kinds of thoughts and ideas came rushing over. How did Celestial Venerable Yu open up the celestial palace? If he is able to, other people should also be able to. If he can create this technique, others can create such a technique too. How did he do it? Suddenly, a light flashed through his mind. Why must Celestial Venerable Yu host the meeting in the Jade Pool and announce the method to become a god? This isn't just a matter of borrowing power, there are also other reasons. Celestial palaces, celestial palaces. So that's it. He suddenly came to a realization. The arrangement of the celestial palaces that Celestial Venerable Yu opened is completely the same with the arrangement of the celestial palaces in the celestial heavens. Celestial Venerable Yu opened up the celestial palaces because when he was observing the construction of the celestial palace, he had the feeling to develop, he had the feeling to create. Divine treasures are to awaken the power in one's corporeal body while the celestial palaces are. Just as he thought until here, he suddenly heard Qin Mu's voice from the top of the altar. Divine treasures are to awaken the power in one's corporeal body while the celestial palaces are to awaken the power of a god in one's corporeal body. I name this huge realm celestial palaces. Founding Emperor's body trembled violently, and he raised his head to look at the youth in purple on the altar. It was like he was seeing another Celestial Venerable Yu. Celestial Venerable Hao's heart trembled violently, and he revealed a look of disbelief. And at this moment, Son of Heaven Yin had gradually woken up, and he managed to hear this sentence precisely. Fear struck him instantly, and he fainted once more. Opening up the celestial palaces requires mobilizing the power of the gods in the corporeal body. On the altar, Qin Mu used vital qi to transform into the visions inside the divine treasures. The sun and the moon lit up in his spirit embryo divine treasure, and his voice rang throughout the main hall of the side palace. He was calm and collected as he spoke. The spirit embryo divine treasure, great sun sovereign, and great moon sovereign. In the vision of those divine treasures, the 5 elements stars lit up again, and the 5 elements star sovereigns stood on their respective stars. 5 elements divine treasures. Saturn sovereign, Mars sovereign, Jupiter sovereign, Mercury sovereign, Venus sovereign. 6 directions divine treasure. Mother Earth, the earth in its devotion carries all things. 7 stars divine treasure. 7 stars aligned, combining the power of 7 gods. Celestial being divine treasure. Stars in the sky, the star sovereigns of the stars, borrowing power from heaven Duke. Life and death divine treasure. Which is also Yudu, the gods controlling the soul, borrowing power from earth Count. Divine bridge divine treasure. The primordial spirit as the god among gods. Qin Mu used his vital qi to transform into the vision of divine arts. The rays from gods lit up, and that was him borrowing the power of numerous gods. The primordial spirit of the divine arts practitioner represented Celestial Emperor, who controlled all power. Once you achieve this step, borrow the power of the celestial heavens to let the gods return to their position, guiding over the power of the celestial heavens to imprint your celestial palace. Qin Mu gave a loud shout. In the apparition of the divine treasures, the gods lent their power, and the power grew larger and larger. The southern heavenly gate, Jade Pool, God Execution Stage, Jade Capital City, Numinous Sky Hall, and Emperor's Throne of the ancient celestial heavens, were forged by the power of the ancient gods. They guided the power over, and it gradually formed a celestial palace in front of the divine bridge. Everyone looked at this sight in a daze. The surroundings were silent, and no one talked. The celestial palace was opened up just like this. Another incomparably grand and huge realm, with multifarious scenes, had appeared in everyone's eyes just like this. This was a great feat, a feat that could make humans and gods be on an equal level. A realm that would allow them to walk into a legendary era. After a long time, someone cheered, Celestial Venerable You. Celestial Venerable You. Celestial Venerable You. There were people cheering everywhere, and their voices shook the sky. Celestial Venerable Hao looked at this sight in a daze, and his heart felt a slight sorrow. I don't have such strong power to rally supporters. If he isn't Celestial Venerable You, how does he know the method to become a god? Could. A terrifying thought appeared in his heart, and he actually felt fear. Celestial Venerable You is really still alive. That's not right, that's not right. I clearly killed him, and Yin Chaojin destroyed his soul. It's impossible for him to be still alive. Furthermore, that existence has already confirmed it, that existence can't be wrong. He felt his hair standing on end. If Celestial Venerable You was still alive, why didn't Celestial Venerable You just kill him directly? Was Celestial Venerable You afraid of that existence behind him? Or did Celestial Venerable You have an even greater plan? In this world, there weren't many people that scared him. Celestial Venerable You was one of them. In front of Celestial Venerable You, he always felt that he was lower than Celestial Venerable You, and even though he also had outstanding talent, he always felt inferior when he saw Celestial Venerable You. Thus, he had to get rid of him. He had to get rid of Celestial Venerable You to get rid of the god in his heart. And now, this god that made him unable to breathe was coming back. He needs to die, he thought to himself. At this moment, Qin Mu's voice rang out. Celestial Venerable Hao, it's your turn. Qin Mu called out a few times, and only then did Celestial Venerable Hao return to his senses, and give a forced smile. He began to talk, and continued Qin Mu's method of opening the Celestial Palace. It was just that he wasn't focused, and would pause occasionally as he spoke. After Brother Yu's method of opening the Celestial Palace, One could be able to achieve being equal to gods, they could be immortal. However, this is only the preliminary success. There are still waves of tests ahead. Because we are borrowing power from the ancient gods and the celestial heavens, we have to return it, or there will be predestined fate. The first test will be Southern Heavenly Gate. Only after crossing Southern Heavenly Gate does one truly stabilize one's celestial palace. This step is to borrow the power of the celestial heavens to turn the fake into real. Celestial Venerable How quickly stabilized his mind and said the cultivation method of the Southern Heavenly Gate that Celestial Venerable Yu had told him. Celestial Venerable How hadn't cultivated to Southern Heavenly Gate, and Celestial Venerable Yu also hadn't. However, as the founder of Celestial Palace, he had managed to determine some realms. His knowledge of this realm had also reached an astonishing height. Celestial Venerable How could only repeat Celestial Venerable Yu's words. Qin Mu continued and talked about the cultivation of the Jade Pool realm. After Jade Pool, Celestial Venerable How spoke about the dangers of the God execution stage. Qin Mu then talked about the marvel of cultivating to the Jade Capital realm. Celestial Venerable How then talked about the numinous Sky realm. When he was done, Qin Mu talked about the Emperor's Throne realm, and completed the 7 great realms. Founding Emperor's heart sank. After finishing the 7 great realms of Celestial Palace, Mu Qing is probably going to make a move to kill him, right? He has already confirmed his identity as Celestial Venerable Yu. So if he pointed out that Celestial Venerable How and Son of Heaven Yin were the murderers that had killed him, the angry mob could just tear both of them apart. But Son of Heaven Yin didn't die, so what exactly happened? Who died? What changed? Just as he thought until here, Celestial Venerable Hao's voice came from the altar and he laughed. Brother Yu left the last realm for me to explain, so I will take your place with reluctance. Let us talk about the realm above Emperor's throne, Celestial Heavens. Founding Emperor's mind was blown. He opened his eyes wide in disbelief. The 8th realm. There was actually an 8th realm. He had never heard of a Celestial Heavens realm above the Emperor's throne realm. Nyo Sandwa's mind was blank. From the past to the present, there were no records of this realm at all, and there weren't even rumors of it. Celestial Venerable Yu. On the altar, Qin Mu's expression was dim. He thought to himself, "You're truly Celestial Venerable Yu. I still can't be compared to him, his death is truly a pity. Such a person shouldn't be buried in history." On the altar, Celestial Venerable Hao's explanation was bumpy and full of mistakes, but he had roughly explained the whole gist of it. Celestial Palace was only one palace in the Celestial Heavens, and the Celestial Heavens had 36 Celestial Palaces. To surpass the Emperor's throne realm would be to construct the Celestial Heavens and open up the 36 Celestial Palaces. Coming to the Celestial Heavens realm, it would be a huge improvement and leap, a qualitative leap. Yet there was no news about this realm in the future, and it was obviously lost through history. Celestial Venerable Hao finished explaining and blushed in shame. "Everyone, it's not that I'm not trying to be clear, but Brother Yu told me he hasn't opened up this realm completely as well." "Brother Yu, is that right?" Qin Mu stood up, and his face had no expression. It was terrifyingly calm. "That's right. Celestial Heavens, this realm is too profound. I still haven't comprehended it until my death." Beads of cold sweat broke out on Celestial Venerable Hao's forehead. He secretly moved a step back and said with a smile, "Hasn't Brother Yu come back to life? The term until your death seems a little too harsh. My mother always admired you, and she will definitely be very happy to see you alive." The hidden meaning of his words was to make Celestial Venerable Yu not blow the matter up, and also to point out the existence behind him. However, he didn't know that Qin Mu didn't care about that at all. Celestial Venerable Yu might care for the greater good, but Qin Mu wasn't Celestial Venerable Yu. Even founding emperor couldn't change Qin Mu's mind. So what was Celestial Venerable Hao's mother? Right at this moment, an ancient god flew over and announced loudly. The name of the celestial heavens is determined. His Majesty had determined on the name of the celestial heavens with heaven duke and earth count. The side palace broke out in an uproar, and everyone flooded out. They heard the voice of that ancient god passing above their heads, and moving away into the distance. The celestial heavens will be named Dragon Han. This year will be the first year of Dragon Han. Founding emperor, and the old bull's heart trembled violently. Was Dragon Han era finally beginning? 3 heavens of Dragon Han, is it beginning from now? Qin Mu was slightly in a daze. That nursery rhyme from Crimson Light Realm, 3 heavens of Dragon Han, Crimson Light separated into 2. Today was the day they officially entered into Dragon Han era. He had a weird feeling in his heart. What was history? This is history. He was located in history, and became a silhouette in the era. And in this silhouette, in the grand and vast celestial heavens, there were people celebrating everywhere. The majestic gods stood high above, and they smiled as they looked at the people celebrating happily below. Half-gods were flying in the air with dragons and phoenixes as symbols of good fortune. Everyone was running and spreading the news on the celestial river, and on pleasure boats. Couples laid in each other embrace to look at the gorgeous divine arts in the sky. Those were divine arts released by the excited people, and they added color to the celestial heavens. The silhouette of this history presented the start of a golden age. Yet at this moment, very few people would remember Celestial Venerable Yu. They were all celebrating, and who would remember that person that had truly pushed this era into the golden age? The person who was already lying in the coffin, and would never see the golden age that was about to come. This world, is there no more righteousness? In the celebration, Qin Mu looked down at his own hands and started to chuckle. Founding Emperor is right, this matter doesn't need justice, there's no righteousness. History doesn't need me to uphold justice. However, he raised his head and looked at the sky bustling with noise and excitement. His chuckles became loud, unrestrained laughter. But Celestial Venerable Yu needs justice. History doesn't need justice, but the people in history need this justice. He grabbed his collar and tore down the purple robe that belonged to Celestial Venerable Yu. The purple robe floated in the wind and floated by the people that were celebrating. His chest was blazing with fury, and he laughed towards the sky. He laughed to his heart's content and to vent all his resentment. History won't give them justice, but I God *MN can. I can King give them this justice. I also King need this justice. He wanted to drink so much. He wanted to hug a jar of wine and drink like butcher, to drink until he was intoxicated like Qian Shu, to lift his knives and kill. Even though he hadn't drank, he was already intoxicated as he walked towards Celestial Venerable Hao. Celestial Venerable Hao squeezed through the crowd and tried to avoid him. Founding Emperor and the old bull were outside to witness this exciting moment when a purple robe rolled in the wind. It floated towards the jade pool and landed in the sea. Celestial Venerable Yu's purple robe. Founding Emperor was astonished, and he hurriedly turned his head. He grabbed the old bull's hand and asked in a hurry, "Where's Mu Qing? Where's Mu Qing?" The old bull was also searching for him urgently. He was still on the altar earlier, they should still be in the main hall, right? When the ancient god announced the name Dragon Han, he also walked out of the main hall. Founding Emperor dragged the old bull forward and said anxiously, "He has taken off his clothes, because he wants to kill during the commotion. Go, quickly go. We have to find him before things blow up." The old bull moved his magic power, and Founding Emperor floated up uncontrollably. Both of them floated through the air. "Your magic power is shallow, let me bring you along. The old bull said solemnly, take note of the crowd below, we must find him. Founding Emperor surveyed the surroundings in a hurry, and tried to find Qin Mu. An open and honest youth in green traveling, stubbornly saying there's male and female wind. With a drop of overwhelming aura, enjoying the powerful wind that brings along endless happiness. Qin Mu only felt his body becoming warmer and warmer. His blood was pumping furiously. I want to be like Grandpa Butcher, fast knife, fine wine, good to sever heads. Just like him, being able to turn his heroism into poems in the war. It's a pity I don't have his literary talent. He is a great scholar, speaking his mind with poems, and his poems assisted Heaven Knife to sever the heads of pigs quickly. I'm still lacking. He followed Celestial Venerable Hao to the sea surface. The huge beasts and huge turtles swam under the sea surface, and only some huge fish were swimming comfortably in the air. Those were half-gods, the descendants of ancient gods. Celestial Venerable Hao continued to walk forward, and there were more and more half-gods surrounding him. Qin Mu also continued to walk forward. But my knife is equally fast. My fists are equally heavy. I won't be slower than Grandpa Butcher when it comes to slaying evil. Part 287. The Jade Pool was like a sea. To ancient gods with huge corporeal bodies, the Jade Pool was just like a pool to them, but to humans, this place was as vast as the sea. In fact, the Jade Pool still had another name, which was the Jade Sea. In the sea, divine turtles were carrying hallowed and sacred mountains on their backs as they roamed around in pleasure. There were also huge lotuses, and their petals were like mountains. They had a myriad of colors and looked brilliant. Coming to the Jade Pool, divine arts practitioners wouldn't find the Jade Pool too huge. Instead, they would find that they had shrunk countless times. In front, Celestial Venerable Hao had already stopped in his tracks. This place was far away from the Jade Pool small construction, and the Jade Pool treasured island. Around him, half-gods walked over, and there were even some flying in the sky and some hidden in the clouds. There were also some hidden under the sea. When Qin Mu walked on the sea surface, he could see the bodies of huge beasts swimming past quickly. The scales were the same color as the ripples. Celestial Venerable You, is it really you? Celestial Venerable Hao looked at him walking over and suddenly sighed. With a solemn look on his face, he said, it's weird to say this, but I actually hope you're really him, but I also know you shouldn't be him. You are already dead, you can't be alive. Under that kind of situation, how could you still be alive? Yet you are breathing and alive right in front of me, this makes me very puzzled. He revealed a dazed expression. I clearly killed you and destroyed your soul, yet you can still come back from the dead. How did you do it? In the sky, an ancient god with huge ears was currently listening in on everything that was happening in the Jade Pool. When he heard Celestial Venerable Hao's words, he suddenly shuddered and turned away. At the same time, the expression of a one-eyed god under the ground of the Jade Pool had a huge change. He tunneled out from the ground and soared into the sky. The two ancient gods met each other, and they had a weird expression when they saw each other. They were none other than Heavenly Hearing and Earthly Sight General that Celestial Emperor had dispatched to investigate this case. Should we tell this to His Majesty? Heavenly Hearing asked. Earthly Sight shook his head and grunted. Aren't you afraid of death? If we tell His Majesty, both of us are going to die. Heavenly Hearing frowned and his ears curled up. He said with a low voice, His Majesty ordered us to investigate the case, and Celestial Venerable Yu's death is no small matter. He is a Celestial Venerable after all, the first Celestial Venerable. Furthermore, he was the Celestial Venerable that was blessed by all of the gods. His death will probably create huge trouble. Earthly Sight only had an eye in the heart of his brows. At this moment, he closed his eyes and shook his head. So what if we tell His Majesty? His Majesty will just leave it unsettled. The trouble created will only be even bigger. At that time, His Majesty will just seal our mouths and get rid of us. Heavenly Hearing was instantly out of ideas. What should we do? See no evil, hear no evil. Ancient God Earthly Sight said, I'm blind and you're deaf, that will protect our lives. Ancient God Heavenly Hearing nodded his head. We can only do so. It's just Celestial Venerable you will have lost his life in vain. Celestial Venerable Mu transforming into Celestial Venerable you, imparting his technique in place of him, and even taking revenge for him. He is probably going to lose his life in vain too. What a pity, 2 Celestial Venerables lost. Ancient God Earthly Sight said with a sigh, when he took out Celestial Venerable Yu's corpse, I jumped in shock. When he transformed into Celestial Venerable Yu, I was shocked again. I didn't know what he wanted to do, but when I heard him imparting the techniques in place of Celestial Venerable Yu, I started to admire him. Ancient God Heavenly Hearing hesitated for a moment and said, in that case, how should we answer about his matters? Ancient God Earthly Sight also hesitated for a moment. See no evil, hear no evil, we are blind and deaf. We didn't see him, and we also don't know that he transformed into Celestial Venerable Yu. That's right, nothing happened here, we are unaware. After the 2 ancient gods finished their discussion, they immediately flew away. On the surface of the sea, half-gods roamed in the sky and on the sea surface. They locked down the area. Around Celestial Venerable Hao, half-gods surrounded him to protect him. Celestial Venerable Yu, you insist on falling out. Celestial Venerable Hao sighed and said with a smile, you know my background, you can't touch me. You suffered, but you can only endure it. Celestial Venerable Yu, you can retreat. In front of him, a half-god had the whiskers of a tiger and the scales of a dragon, and he revealed a body of half a human and half a god. He said indifferently, even though you have suffered, your body hasn't died, you are a genius, you should be able to see and understand the current trend. You're right. Another half-god also transformed into a half-god and half-human form. He chuckled and said, when you died in the slow winding pavilion, you should have known you can't fight Celestial Venerable Hao. Have you forgotten how you were always unable to escape from the slow winding pavilion? Have you forgotten who used magic power to seal the slow winding pavilion? Another half-god transformed and smiled. Even though you are the genius of the human race, and you are crowned as Celestial Venerable that's blessed by all gods, you are still a human after all. It was that existence that got us to seal the slow winding pavilion, which is why you couldn't get any help no matter how much you cried. Another half-god walked forward and smirked. Human, naturally weak, even if you cultivate the Celestial Palace, it's still impossible for you to be a match for half-gods. You will only die here by forcing yourself to make a mistake again. This time, you will definitely not come back to life. Celestial Venerable Hao said with a smile, Celestial Venerable Yu. Qin Mu, who hadn't spoken for a long time, suddenly interrupted him. Shouldn't you call me brother or father? Celestial Venerable Hao laughed loudly. Call you brother or father? Do you know who my father is? Do you know who my brother is? Boom. Qin Mu took a step forward, and the surface of the sea exploded. Celestial Venerable Hao was astonished. Suddenly, darkness loomed over his eyes. So fast. He was being surrounded by numerous half-gods, and these half-gods were followers he had chosen carefully. Every half-god had extremely powerful abilities, and there were even half-gods stronger than him. He was also a half-god himself. His bloodline was even higher than the other half-gods, so after he grew, his abilities would be stronger than the other half-gods. Yet he was only in his teenage years while the half-gods that were following him were much older, thus, their abilities were even stronger. Yet this step of Qin Mu made him moved like a phantom to his face. The other half-gods didn't have time to react. The darkness in front of his eyes wasn't because the sky suddenly turned dark. It was because Qin Mu's fist had come right into his face and blocked all of his vision. Celestial Venerable Hao's face distorted, and when Qin Mu's fist smashed his face, he could hear his nose bridge cracking. In the next instant, he heard the crisp crack from his rib. That was the first rib. Then, it was the second and the third. Qin Mu's fist landed on his face and at the same time, his kneecaps smashed heavily on his ribs. Two kinds of force exploded at the same time, and Celestial Venerable Hao flew backward. He still couldn't see anything in front of his eyes. Pack! He bounced up high and landed on the water surface. Then, he bounced up again, and landed back down once more. You dare! Numerous half-gods only reacted after, and the half-god with tiger whiskers and dragon scales roared. The blood in his body boiled, and his god might climbed upwards furiously. His aura instantly became incomparably terrifying and violent. However, before his attack could even land, a sword light had already pierced through his head. Qin Mu pulled out his sword, and his body bent at a weird angle. Avoiding the attack behind him, he grabbed the hand of another half-god, and that half-god had scales all over his hands. The scales flew up and swirled to slice at Qin Mu. The sword in Qin Mu's hand suddenly transformed into knife light, and the knife light crisscrossed. That half-god held onto his neck, but the head on his neck had already rushed into the sky via his vigorous qi and blood. The other half-gods were all surrounding Qin Mu and shouted angrily in unison. Seawater rose up like a water pillar, and the huge figures attacked towards Qin Mu altogether. Return of Thousand Palms. Around Qin Mu's body, countless after-images of him were formed, and they suddenly merged. Beyond the strange peaks of heavens. Boom! His skill from his martial path exploded, and the huge figures went flying in all directions, making huge waves as they crashed into the sea. Qin Mu wiped away the blood on the corner of his mouth, and stepped towards Celestial Venerable Hao, who had smashed into the sea. The sea suddenly split apart, and the half-gods hiding underwater opened their huge mouths to bite at him. Runes around Qin Mu's body swirled, and his teleportation divine art was activated. The head of that half-god was suddenly teleported, and only his headless body crashed into the sea. The god's blood dyed a part of the sea red in color. In the next moment, Qin Mu's figure appeared, and he smashed through the head of that half-god with a punch. There was no blood on his body at all as he walked forward. In front, Celestial Venerable Hao's face was all blooded, and he suppressed his injuries. He turned around to escape and shouted, "Stop him!" Swooshing sounds came from above Qin Mu's head as a half-god flapped his wings to swoop down from the sky. His speed was extremely fast, and he was like a shooting star. Half-god possessed the bloodline of ancient gods, and they each had special skills and areas they were good in. The closer they got to adulthood, the stronger their battle power would be. Some half-gods weren't weaker than the ancient gods. Those half-gods that were following Celestial Venerable Hao were all the younger generation, but their abilities were pretty extraordinary. Yet when the half-god with bird wings swooped down, he instantly lost sight of Qin Mu. His neck felt cold, and then he saw his headless body crashing into the sea. What is this divine art? I have never seen it before. Qin Mu continued forward, and his gaze was fixed on Celestial Venerable Hao, who was stumbling away miserably. The sea in front exploded, and a divine elephant that was completely white came sprinting towards him on the sea. Two huge waves were being raised to the left and right, and each wave was 300 yards tall. The divine elephant trumpeted, and its sound was deafening. He charged towards Qin Mu at a terrifying speed. Qin Mu raised both of his arms, and a knife light came slashing down to slice the divine elephant in half. He kept on sprinting and ran past the two halves of the elephant. Celestial Venerable Hao turned back to look at this sight, and he was endlessly astonished. The sea surged, and a huge fish soared into the sky, controlling the sea water to press down on Qin Mu. The sea suddenly trembled and covered Qin Mu. Dead. Dead. The huge fish was incomparably delighted and shouted. Other half-gods also came flying over and landed on the sea surface. Divine light came out from their eyes, as they looked for signs of Qin Mu. Celestial Venerable Hao also stopped and spat out the blood in his mouth. Right at this moment, a pitch-black gate suddenly appeared on the sea and started spinning furiously. It swept past the bodies of the half-gods, and their souls fell into Yudu. They crashed into the sea as they turned into corpses. Celestial Venerable Hao's pupils shrank. He only saw Qin Mu's head popping out from the sea before he gradually rose up. Even if he was in the sea, he was still walking over calmly. Qin Mu's body grew taller and taller as he appeared on the sea surface once again. You aren't Celestial Venerable Yu. Celestial Venerable Yu doesn't have such astonishing divine arts. Celestial Venerable Hao moved back and stared at Qin Mu. The other half-gods came and spewed fire, while some shot powerful beams from their gazes. Some had feathers as swords and knives, but to Qin Mu, these divine arts from the primitive people were simply too superficial. Before these divine arts could even reach him, the owner of the divine art would already have been slaughtered by him. In this era, there was no divine art that was worth his time. Even with godlike abilities, other divine arts were full of flaws in his eyes. As long as the opponent attacked, they were bound to die. He continued forward, and Celestial Venerable Hao gritted his teeth and continued running. He shouted, "I know who you are. Celestial Venerable Mu." He escaped to a divine mountain and shouted loudly, "Celestial Venerable Mu wants to kill me." The turtle carrying the divine mountain turned around and looked at Qin Mu, who was walking over step by step. He said with a solemn voice, "Celestial Venerable Yu, even though you have remarkable abilities, this is the Jade Pool. Do you know who Celestial Venerable Hao's mother is? If you knew." Qin Mu raised his hand, and countless swords traveled underwater at a rapid speed. That old turtle was furious and sneered, "How dare a pearl the size of a grain shine in front of the sun?" Opening calamity. A beam of sword light was brilliant like a pillar. It stretched over a dozen miles and pierced through the heart of the turtle's brows, before it shot out from the back of the island. The divine mountain sank. Qin Mu recalled his swords, and they formed a circular ball that spun quickly on the sea surface. Celestial Venerable Hao, who was on the divine mountain, hurriedly jumped and escaped. Runes swirled around Qin Mu as he flashed and closed the distance between them. Suddenly, a cryptic aura came over and caused the space in the surroundings to tremble continuously. Celestial Venerable Hao was delighted and shouted loudly, "Mother!" Qin Mu's pupils contracted. He stretched his hands to point out, and the speed of the sword pellet instantly increased by more than 10 times. All of his magic power, all of his essence, energy, and spirit were fused into this sword. He had to kill Celestial Venerable Hao before that incomparably strong existence descends. This sword was none other than Qin Mu's first form of the Calamity Sword, Opening Calamity Sword. This was his strongest sword skill. The speed of the sword pellet spun faster and faster. This sword pellet was a spirit weapon he had refined not long ago. The sword pellet spun at an astonishing speed and flew close to the sea surface. Countless fine swords leaped out from the sword pellet, and the tip of the swords were all pointing at Celestial Venerable Hao. Behind the sword pellet, Qin Mu was exploding with full force and rushing ahead. His magic power poured into the sword pellet, and the vital qi between his flying swords connected. The swords presented countless runes that weaved and changed continuously. The runes were like sparks as they leaped from flying sword to flying sword. The positions of the flying swords also continuously changed, and they were like fish in the sea. The flying swords were silver-colored fish that shuttled up and down, unleashing the charm of his sword skills perfectly. In the next instant, countless flying swords seemed to be one as the runes and vital chi exhibited incomparable agility and flexibility. The swords sprinting on the sea surface transformed into a gorgeous flowing light, and that was the flying swords transforming to display the most basic 18th sword form perfectly. Looking from afar, this was a flying sword that had an astonishing length. It was a very simple sword move, and that was a stab. Looking at it in detail, countless transformations were hidden in this simple move. This was the first time he had executed this sword move so perfectly since he created the Calamity Sword. Yet the space in that instant suddenly becomes sticky and dense. Space originally had no resistance, the resistance was from the air itself. Yet, in this instance, there seemed to be a kind of indescribable power in the space which caused his sword skill to encounter extreme resistance. Qin Mu exerted his force to stab forward, and his opening Calamity Sword also stabbed forward easily like it was slicing bamboo. The tip of the sword was closing in on Celestial Venerable Hao. Yet Qin Mu felt that the resistance was also increasing sharply. This kind of power wasn't purely the power of divine art. It seemed to be the pressure from an extraordinary rule. Qin Mu had encountered this kind of pressure when he had entered the southern heavenly gate of bullfighting world. The pressure from the southern heavenly gate came from all directions, and it affected all areas of his corporeal body and primordial spirit. It was even affecting his opening Calamity Sword. It was Qin Mu's first time encountering an instance where his sword path divine art was being suppressed. The sword tip of opening Calamity Sword was still stabbing forward, but its speed was becoming slower and slower. When it came to the face of Celestial Venerable Hao, the speed of the sword light had already become as slow as the crawling of a snail. And at this moment, sunlight soared out from Celestial Venerable Hao's back. There were thousands of rays gathering from all directions. That wasn't Celestial Venerable Hao's mother descending personally, it was just her projection. Her true body should have still been in the celestial heavens, she didn't descend personally. That was a goddess, and around her body, sunlight floated like sashes. They were extraordinarily gorgeous. Her body was graceful, and it was different from Goddess of Heavenly Yin's wild and boorish dressing. Her makeup was very exquisite. Sunlight formed sashes to float around her, and other than being able to cover her body well, it also revealed her curves very well. On the other hand, Goddess of Heavenly Yin used a rough method of utilizing sunlight to block her private parts, while revealing other parts of her body. Goddess of Heavenly Yin also only had 1 or 2 accessories on her, while this goddess had numerous accessories on her. Furthermore, they were all very exquisite. There were over a dozen accessories. There were hairpins, a jade tassel headdress, a necklace that had pearls like moons around her collarbone, a jade bracelet on her wrist, rings on her fingers, and pearls that were like little bells on her ankle. Celestial Venerable Hao stood in front of his sword light, and gave a sigh of relief. Qin Mu was still trying his best to advance, and he released the power of opening calamity. He was trying to break the suppression of that goddess. Yet it was still difficult for this sword to advance forward. The sword only advanced an inch, and it reached the maximum of Qin Mu's power. Celestial Venerable Hao revealed a smile. Celestial Venerable you are impudent. The apparition of the goddess spoke, and her voice was loud and clear, penetrating deep into his heart. It had an apathetic tone to her calm and tranquil voice. You have just come back from the dead, you should trembling with fear as if walking on thin ice. Have you forgotten that you were suppressed by a force before you died? The slow winding pavilion, that's where my sister stayed. Don't you know that's my power? Qin Mu was still struggling to move forward, and he was full of strength. He had to kill Celestial Venerable Hao. That goddess frowned. Failing to appreciate my kindness. Hao, send him on his way. Don't leave any trouble behind this time, destroy the corpse completely. Celestial Venerable Hao bowed and expressed his thanks. He walked around the sword light, that was 10 miles long. The sword light was fixed in the air as if it were frozen. Celestial Venerable Hao was finally at ease as he walked towards Qin Mu, who was 10 miles away. He said with a smile, "But mother, he isn't Celestial Venerable Yu." That goddess was astonished and turned her head to look at Qin Mu, but she couldn't see through Qin Mu's disguise. Celestial Venerable Hao felt very good. He is Celestial Venerable Mu. The true Celestial Venerable Yu is probably still in the coffin and buried underground. The Celestial Venerable Mu that His Majesty has just bestowed the title on. That goddess nodded her head and said, "His divine art sure is different from the rest. It has all kinds of unimaginable marvel." Celestial Venerable Hao walked to the center of the 10 miles sword light and said, "He used a strange and marvelous technique to change his face to look like Celestial Venerable Yu." Celestial Venerable Yu also passed down the method to become a god to him before he died, allowing him to pose as Celestial Venerable Yu. However, what I want to know is if his original face is his true face or not. I suspect the face of Celestial Venerable Mu is also a fake face. That goddess revealed a smile. "My son is clever. If you kill him, he will have no choice but to reveal his true appearance. Mother has already suppressed him, feel free to attack." Right at this moment, the sword light suddenly shrunk. The 10 miles of sword light suddenly shrunk into a ball and stopped right in front of Celestial Venerable Hao. Celestial Venerable Hao was stunned and felt his blood ran cold. When the sword light suddenly shrunk, it made him feel as though he was being stared at by an incomparably fierce ancient god. He felt like he had fallen into a slaughterhouse. Qin Mu was 5 miles away and was frozen in place by that goddess. He couldn't move, and his teeth were crunching loudly as he clenched them. Blood was flowing from the corner of his lips. The sword pellet moved. Qin Mu suddenly gave off an astonishing roar. Raising calamity. That goddess was astonished and hurriedly increased her magic power to press down on the sword pellet. Her power was incomparably huge and copious, so she instantly shackled the sword pellet. However, the strange thing was that even though the sword pellet was suppressed, flying swords could still fly out from the sword pellet. That goddess suppressed once again, but she couldn't suppress those twitching sword lights no matter what. Those sword light flew right at Celestial Venerable Hao. Celestial Venerable Hao moved back quickly, and those sword lights skipped on a strange course. That was a sword skill that didn't belong to any of the 18 sword skills. Even the apparition of ancient gods couldn't suppress it. PSSH, PSSH, PSSH. Celestial Venerable Hao's body got pierced through by the sword light, and bloody holes opened up in him. The second form of Calamity Sword, Raising Calamity Sword. After opening Calamity, it was raising Calamity, raising the calamity to kill the person. Under the apparition of this ancient god, under the situation where he was completely helpless to fight back, Qin Mu finally comprehended the second chapter of the sword path. He had taken another step forward on this path of the sword. Not only that, his sword skill had finally shown the 19th basic sword skill, pushing the sword path of the world another step forward. Blood sprayed out from Celestial Venerable Hao's body, and the unpredictable course of the Raising Calamity Sword had broken through all suppression. The sword move was strange and unpredictable, so he couldn't defend himself at all. Even that goddess couldn't do anything about those sword light, much less him. In this era, not even the 14 sword forms were created, much less the 19th sword form. At the same time, the apparition of that goddess smacked towards Qin Mu. Since she couldn't restrain those sword lights, she would just have to smack Qin Mu to death first. That would naturally stop Qin Mu's attack. Her palm force was incomparably fast. When her palm pressed down, the sea suddenly sank in down a radius of 100 miles. A huge handprint appeared. Also, at the same time, she saw another young man stepping on the sea surface to rush here. The surface of the sea exploded continuously under his feet. That young man ran, and his hands moved up and down. Countless divine arts swirled around him, and he rushed towards Qin Mu as he toppled the mountains and overturned the seas. Too weak. That goddess disregarded him, when a huge fist suddenly filled the entirety of heaven and earth. Before that young man's divine art could reach, that fist collided with her palm with a loud bang. The jade pool shook, and the petals of countless lotuses were shaken off. Huge old turtles carrying divine mountains on their backs were also thrown into midair, and they struggled helplessly. Demonis, old Master Nyo Ben is right here. With a shout, the old bull transformed into a bull-headed god with mean and lean muscles. He crashed into the surface of the sea. The seawater churned and shattered the countless divine arts from Founding Emperor, throwing Qin Mu, Founding Emperor, and Celestial Venerable Hao into the sky and far away. Founding Emperor moved his body in the air with difficulty. He leaped and caught up with Qin Mu, grabbing him into his embrace. On the other side, a beam of sunlight swept Celestial Venerable Hao away, and blocked that terrifying impact. Celestial Venerable Hao was bleeding from all of his orifices. There were thousands of holes in his body, and they were wounds caused by the strange and unpredictable raising calamity sword. Those rays of sunlight tunneled into his body and sealed his wounds, stopping him from bleeding. The sunlight then sent him to the Jade Pavilion, which was far away. Celestial Venerable Hao laid there motionlessly. Founding Emperor carried Qin Mu and rushed out frantically. Even though Qin Mu, who was in his embrace, had all of his bones shattered, his flesh and blood were squirming continuously. The shattered bones were being discharged, and new bones were being formed. Still not dead under that kind of pressure. Founding Emperor was astonished. "My sword," Qin Mu said weakly. "Screw your sword." Founding Emperor was furious and scolded, "I told you not to create trouble. If I wasn't perceptive, and didn't call Senior Nyo Ben to come to look for you in the Jade Sea, you would have been long dead." Qin Mu revealed a smile. "You are now like a living person, I'm very happy." Founding Emperor was slightly stunned. He also revealed a smile. "Stop talking, heal yourself." Qin Mu opened up his palm and beckoned behind him. Countless fine sword lights flew over and collided to form a sword pellet that flew with them. The sword pellet closed in quickly. "Let us go kill Celestial Venerable Hao." Qin Mu coughed up blood and said weakly, "He's almost dead, I just need to stab him once more. Compared to him, I feel you should be more worried about our lives." Founding Emperor sighed and saw more and more half-gods in the surroundings. He said with a soft voice, "You don't have to kill him. I will personally end his life in the future to take revenge for Celestial Venerable you. Now, I'm just worried about how we can escape." Qin Mu suddenly shed a tear and turned his head over. He thought to himself, "Old ancestor, you didn't manage to. I don't even know if you are still alive. I once thought that you should fight fiercely and even die on the battlefield. However, I hope you are alive in Carefree Village even more now." This video will end here.